We good? Okay, we are good. So we'll go ahead and get started with our Flagler County Board of County Commissioners special meeting. It's October 19th, 2020. It's about 2:10 in the afternoon. We're in the Government Services Building, Board Chambers in Bunnell, Florida. With that, I'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just a quick moment of silence. We ask God to bless all the citizens of Flagler County, especially the men and women in the military around the world standing watch to maintain our freedom. Here at home, our brave first responders, police, fire, medical personnel who keep us safe, away from danger, and secure in our homes. For those who may be on Zoom, there's essentially only a few staff here in the room, and then we're socially distanced up here on the podium. And to make it a little easier to speak, we are not wearing masks unless we feel we have to call for something like that. I have no chair comments. This meeting is a discussion, approval, adoption of the items addressed for the Florida Governmental Utility Authority, FGUA, closing process. And who is going to be our prime speaker from the staff? Our attorney,
Yes, myself.
Mr. Adid.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. First, let me say that your reference to the Zoom call related to all of those professionals and experts that are involved in the transaction. So they would be consultants to the Florida Governmental Utility Authority and obviously representatives of the organization itself. Our financial advisor, individuals like that are on the Zoom so they can follow what we're doing without needing to be physically present. Okay.
Before you get started out,
Yeah.
this is a special meeting, not a workshop, and therefore we could make approvals at this meeting.
Yes, and you are being specifically asked to take certain actions. They're at the end of the agenda memo, but I will go over those when we get to those. I do want, I had to explain this just a little while ago to someone. This is like a implementation phase meeting that we're having. We have a very complex transaction that we're contemplating that the board approved on July 13, specifically for the benefit of the public, the transfer of all of our utility assets, our utility territory, our utility customers to the Florida Governmental Utility Authority. That's created by virtue of state statute, and it carries out utility operations in a number of jurisdictions in the state of Florida. In any event, those agreements were approved in July. You all may remember those were very extensive, very wordy, very lengthy. And they call for a lot of actions to be taken, understandably. It's a very complex transaction. So we've been working on it. We have reached a stage where it's appropriate for you to get a briefing on where we are at and to give you a preview of where we're going. Our hope, our internal objective is to have this transaction closed by the end of the fourth quarter of this calendar year, okay? And will depend on a lot of things, a lot of moving parts in this transaction, and that's what we're going to do. We've sort of broken it up into like 4 components. You're going to hear about the financial matters, and for that, you will hear from John Brower. He'll go over those things. We have some instruments, things that are in your backup, which he'll go over, and if they need any supplementation, I can do that. And then we're going to go over the real estate matters, okay? And on that subject, you'll hear from Tim Telfer, because he's not the only one. Maybe I should say this. John Brower will get up to speak about the financial. He is not the only person working on that in our team. A bunch of us are working on that. including some of the people on the Zoom call, our bond counsel, our financial advisor, et cetera. Likewise, for the real estate, we have surveyors that are working for us. We have title commitments. We have people on our staff, myself, Heidi Petito, Mr. Cameron, in fact, as well. So a number of people working on that issue, but you're going to hear from one central person, okay? Then the next item is going to be the utility regulatory ordinance. That's in your package. It's been advertised for this meeting, and we'll go over that. We're going to be kind of workshopping that so that you understand this significant change that we are making in our utility regulatory ordinance to accommodate this sale, but also to do something else, which we'll go over.
Mr. Adid, just
Yeah.
before we go on.
Yeah.
One additional question for how we're going to go about doing this. It looked to me when I read through it, like 3 items that we may or may not have to vote on. Will each of those items be done individually? In other words, we'll
Yes.
go through an item, and then we'll decide whether we're going to complete that today or not, rather than wait till the end to do all 3.
Well, for example, at the end of the financial presentation, there are some very specific items. After hearing from Mr. Brower, I would ask the board's pleasure if it wanted to go ahead and adopt those instruments. Okay? So you would make that decision, and then we would go to the next issue. Okay, is that understood?
That's understood, and
Okay.
they do kind of follow in a logical order?
Yes.
Okay.
The items that you have to decide are sequenced according to the way they're going to be presented. The way they're sequenced in the memo is in the same order they'll be presented to you.
All right.
So we try to be consistent at least.
I just want to make sure everybody's,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, and then as I said, the utility regulatory ordinance changes, I'll be presenting that. And then finally, other contractual matters, all the other contractual matters we're putting into one category, and I'll be summarizing those for you. That'll be more in the nature of an update. Okay, so if we can begin? Okay, so what I would like to do is to ask Mr. Brower to step forward and to go over the various financial matters. As he walks up, I will tell you for reference that you have a draft resolution authorizing the various financial transactions that we'll need to engage in order to get to closing. And with that, Mr. Brower.
Mr. Chair, John Brower, Financial Services. As Mr. Adid mentioned, there's a lot of very complicated financial aspects to this. In addition, just the utility billing and changing data over, those types of things are all being worked on. For today, what we need you to approve is a resolution to allow for all those various transactions to occur. In addition to 2 URRs, unanticipated revenue resolutions, to accept grant resolutions or grant revenue for generators for the utilities, and 2 budget transfers for the same generators, our 25% match for that. The resolution, the items we're asking in the resolution to pay for the transactions would be one for the USDA loan, which is a little more complicated because the USDA loan requires a check to be sent. So we'll have to do some additional maneuvering of cash and whatnot through the different funds to get that paid for early. 3 SRF loans and 1 Sterling loan, which is early payoff, so we have to pay a little bit more to have an early payoff, so they're allowing us to do that. And as well as other internal funding mechanisms we had over the past number of years. I'm not sure of the number of years. Without taking any questions.
Board. I just want to make sure I understand the sequence here, which you just asked about. So this is the Board of County Commissioners of Flagler County authorizing the repayment of certain debt obligations with respect to its utility system as debriefed herein, making certain other covenants and agreements in connection therewith, providing for severability and providing for an effective date. Is that one of the items, or is that the whole resolution?
The main resolution incorporates all the funding mechanisms we have. We need to close out the loans, pay off the loans, the internal cash movement, we need to make that happen, especially to the USDA loans, so we can have a check written in advance of the closing date, so we don't have to pay extra interest and such for that loan.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand. I'm just looking at no third party. We've all looked, you all looked at this, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
So we got two budget transfers in there.
Right.
We have to do. And the grant, that's just to pay the 25%? That's why we need that check, right?
Mr. Chair, that's correct. We would have to do that aspect of it anyway,
Right.
regardless of.
But that's part of this.
That is part of it.
Okay.
Right. Two URRs and two budget transfers.
So it
kinda
includes
coincide.
the funding sources, expenditures, the 41,644?
That's for the generators?
Yeah.
Yes, that's the URR,
the-
the
and the-
unanticipated revenue
And
resolution.
there's one other.
Right. One for each fund,
Yeah. Right.
and a
Okay,
corresponding
so
budget
so
transaction.
that's, you're briefing that right now. There's actually 3 signatures it's going to take to get that done. Is that correct?
Well, four, one for each URR and one for each budget transfer. And then the main resolution, we're talking about the big, long, drawn-out one that discusses each of our debt that we have out there and how we can pay that off.
Okay, okay, good. All right. Thank you. So with that,
I'm not sure how we word that motion, though.
so that's,
a
I'm trying to think how we're going to do that motion. Mr. Adid, you might help us
Yes,
out on
the-
this with the
yes,
wording, the specific wording of a motion.
A motion to approve the financial resolution as presented in the board package.
Okay, I can do that.
All right, so bring it back to the board for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the financial resolution as depicted in the backup for this meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Now we'll open it up for public comment. Anyone wishing to comment, please do so now.
Yes. I will address myself as Madam Gentile Yude, as Mr. Hadid calls me. On the first resolution, and thank you, each attachment that requires a signature should be held separately, Mr. Sullivan, thank you. Number one, who is paying the 2% penalty to Sterling? How much is it if the county's going to pay it and then attach it to the water users because this is supposedly an enterprise fund? What are these amounts we're talking about? We also have the revolving loan that we have to pay off. What is the balance? What is the balance from that loan? Thirdly, will be in the first resolution alone, we're exchanging land with ICI. Why? Fourthly, I thought we bought everything we needed from them in 2013. Certainly anything in 7 years should have come to fruition. One of the things that's totally laughable beyond belief is a deed from 1984 has turned up that was recorded in 2016. Adverse possession is in the dictionary. 7 or more years. The county has been maintaining the water utility for 7 years. The title company and the county attorney need to get that stupidity resolved instantly. Fourthly, all actions are going to be done collectively or individually. That means you can all decide together, which makes sense, or the county attorney on his own, or the county attorney individually can make decisions and sign documents. I read all 81 pages. I'm sure very few other people did. Section 5, nobody is liable for anything personally. Wow, that's great. You can spend our money, make us liable, and that's the end of it. Section 6 says, Here, and I'm going to, this is, I think, I'm still on the first attachment. Why are you going to be hiring this firm, PFM? You never hired anybody, the county never hired anyone, I shouldn't say you, when you bought it from Maury Husseini in the first place. Why do you need to hire a firm? We don't know who they are. First, and I do want to see this deed. I do want to see the magical deed, I'm sorry. You're going to hire a firm to help you with a purchase? Who helped the commission? None of you were here except Charlie, and thank you, Charlie. I love you for voting no. And the original purchase, Mr. Hadid, you've been around for the original purchase. Now all of a sudden you need someone to help you, and more than anything else, you have to open all these items. How dare the county want to sell a utility and keep somebody on the board to make sure we do not have the privilege of going to the Public Service Commission? If you transfer the water utility to a private entity, just as before, the citizens can go to the Public Service Commission. On page 75, Mr. Hadid is saying he wants someone from the county to be on the board, so we do not have the privilege of going to the Public Service Commission as we do now. So you're going to pay all this money.
Thank you. So, Mr. Hadid, you may want to respond or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of these points that were raised are not germane to the financial resolution, but I think so that members of the public who are following this are not confused, I'm going to try to remember each one and go through them. Okay, the authorization, the general authorizations, it doesn't, the authorizations are designed to enable us to execute documents and to process the paperwork in accordance with the board's direction. So in other words, if there's a financial instrument and it has the recommendation of our bond counsel, the recommendation of our financial advisor, we've looked at it and we agree with it. The clerk doesn't have an issue with it. Mr. Cameron has looked at it. It allows us to present it actually for execution to go forward with the transaction. We have a whole lot of things that we have to execute and sign. When they're in proper order, this gives us the authorization to move forward. It doesn't give me any decision that somehow, just so the board is clear, so the public is clear, I don't have some kind of decision that I can trump. Oh, no, nothing intended by that. That I can push the escape button and somehow void some kind of direction. If there's any kind of issue that I run into, the first person I go to is Mr. Cameron. And then from there, we decide, we triage what it is we need to do, okay? And I think you all know we've been operating this way for as long as you all have been on the board. This is a very standard authorization that you give us. Second, these are not in the order. I'm organizing them per the agenda. The second thing is that, yes, the members of the county commission are exempt from personal liability, but that is simply a statement of the law. You do not bear personal liability when you act consistent with your duties as a county commissioner. This phraseology, this section is in every single bond resolution that I do for you. You will not find it absent. It is entirely consistent. It's not something new. It's something to be expected. If it wasn't there, somebody would say that I did a bad job. Okay, now the land. I don't know if that's the next thing, but the land thing about the 1984 deed that didn't get recorded until 2016, well, we didn't have any power over somebody when they decided to record. It is a most unusual situation. The deed was executed in 1984 and not filed in 2016. The title company caught it as a potential overlap. That's what title companies do. They identify issues where they need to issue clean title to the purchaser. So in this situation, they identified it as an issue. If it turned out to be a real issue, it would have been problematic. A reference to adverse possession would have got us nowhere because FGUA wants a clear owner's title opinion. And you can't go wave to somebody adverse possession, and they say, okay, we give up here, we'll sign whatever you want us to sign. It doesn't work that way. It'd be a very protracted process. But to bring that to close, we have resolved it. It is no longer an issue. It was a surveying error, and that is being handled in due course. So that issue is a non-issue. I think I emailed you that, right?
did,
I did. You're
right.
nodding your head, yes. Well, we get so busy, so I forgot that I had already done that. Okay. I already did the liability. PFM. PFM, they've been our financial advisors. Jay Glover, you all know him. I don't know, he's been involved in every financial transaction. Whether Jay was involved in the 2013 or 2015 transactions related to ICI, I frankly can't remember because I was not principally involved in those except for certain issues. But because we're defeasing a USDA loan, because we're defeasing or we're satisfying loans that have been provided to us by the DEP, and we're a bank loan, yes, we do need a financial advisor to make sure that we're doing all the right things. The reference to a penalty, that's not a penalty, that's a prepayment, because when we took out the note, we did not anticipate that we would be transferring the system, so we have to essentially pay a premium of 2% in order to advance fund. Because remember, we borrowed it at a certain interest rate, so they had the ability to book the profit that they would get from that loan, and so we are changing that because we're paying it off early. They'll be earning less interest. That's why there's the 2%, okay? Okay, the PSC, the Florida Governmental Utility Authority, being a governmental entity, is not subject to PSC jurisdiction. By the way, the Flagler County Board of County Commissioners is not subject to PSC jurisdiction. PSC is Public Service Commission. We used to be. We used to be until, give me a minute. We used to be until approximately 1996, 97, 98. I litigated that case. It went all the way to the First District Court of Appeal and also to DOA, and we prevailed on that, and we are not subject to the Public Service Commission jurisdiction. So FGUA, the way their governmental structure works, the Florida Government Utility Authority, the way it works is that all the communities that have, where they operate the utilities, they allow the government, the host government, to have a member on their board of directors. So we were given that allowance, and you may remember I presented this to you in July 13 to be exact, that they do not want an elected official because the duration, the term of that election official can change in an election. So I suggested the county administrator, and the board agreed. So that was an action that you actually took on July 13, 2020. Okay, and what that effectively does as far as rates, let's say the FGUA is now taking over. We're forecasting 3 years into the future. And they want to raise a rate, and the residents of Plantation Bay have a problem with it. Well, more than likely, you're going to hear about it, right? More than likely, whoever is sitting in Mr. Cameron's seat, he or she will hear about it. And so they'll be making those views known to the FGUA during their board meetings and making their decisions for the betterment of everybody. The FGUA is designed to work for the benefit of the communities it serves. And by the way, the FGUA was recommended from the get-go. For those of you that have studied this, Mr. Erickson, you will remember this. It was my express recommendation in the year 2010 that the FGUA take over the Plantation Bay utility, take that acquisition and operate it, and we would really have avoided all of this stuff that we're now here doing up to this point in time.
This all have balance, liquidated by FGUA.
Yes, actually, two things. The SRF balance, that's the State Revolving Loan Fund balance from DEP, will be liquidated by FGUA, not us. What are the amount of those balances? Well, those have to be trued up as of the date of closing, okay? So all the balances of the various loans, they have to be trued up on the day of closing. I'm sure that approximate numbers could be provided. They're not within my knowledge. I don't know to what degree we can offer those, but I know that the numbers cannot be trued up until until you say, okay, this is going to be our closing date. Compute, give us a payoff amount. So I think I covered all of those.
All right, thank you.
miscellaneous
I
issues.
just wanted to make sure I understand on the attachments. We have a motion on the table for a master resolution authorizing financial transfers and settlements and closing accounts. That's does it include the second attachment, which is budget resolutions and amendments? and
No,
it
that's
does not?
correct.
Okay, because that.
We're taking them one at a
That's the budget
time.
for the well-filled generators. So we're only doing the first one, master resolution authorizing financial transfers and settlements and closing accounts. I just want to make that
That's
clear.
correct. We're going to do them one at a time, so there's no mistake.
Right. So we have a motion and a second. We've had public comment. Any further discussion from the board? Not, bring it back
Chair.
to the board for a
Chair.
vote.
Chair, there is someone on Zoom that had their hand raised that might have been part of that comment.
Okay, you got to tell me. I mean, there's
Yep,
only-
that's why I apologize.
Can we hear that person?
A person who has their hand raised there in Zoom with a phone number 407-414-0625. Go ahead.
This is Jay Glover from PFM. I don't know that I have my hand raised, but that's my phone number. So if my hand is raised, it's accidentally raised, I apologize.
Okay,
All
thank you
right.
very much.
So it's not a valid hand raise there. So bring it back to the board for vote. All those in favor of the master resolution authorizing financial transfers and settlements and closing accounts signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. It passes unanimously. We'll go on to the next item.
Well, the next item, as presented, it's to
I know.
consider amending, do you want me to recite it?
Um,
Amending the adopted budget for unanticipated grant revenue for the hazard mitigation program for wellfield generators.
Okay, that's longer than what's I have written on the attachment, but I just want to make sure what I read is budget resolutions and amendments and staff memorandum regarding amending the adopted FY 2021 budget for
That's true, and I'm going through them one at a time.
That's what we're talking about.
That's what we're doing.
Okay.
And we've got associated with that, an unanticipated revenue resolution, that's an unanticipated revenue resolution for Plantation Bay, an unanticipated revenue resolution for Beverly Beach, two budget transfers, the two accounts. So you can choose to do those four instruments that I've just told you. You can do them as one motion, that you're approving those four items, or you can take them one at a time, up to you.
So I'm bringing it back to the board for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve a budget resolution to our FY '21 budget to reflect the staff memorandum regarding amending for the wellfield generators for the unplanned revenue for Plantation Bay and Beverly Beach.
Second.
And that includes, the maker of the motion, that includes the two resolutions and the two budget transfers?
Right, plus two budget transfers.
Right.
Right. So we have a motion and a second. I will open it up for public comment again.
comment on this issue. Jane Gentile, Madam Jane Gentile, you. I see here, finally, there's a number being mentioned. You're going to be using for Plantation Bay 1,076,232 out of the reserve. Since we are an enterprise fund, what will be the balance of the reserves for the Plantation Bay Utility Fund after you take out that 1,076,000? Because we're the users, we have no idea what's going on, nobody tells us. Secondly, I'd like to correct Mr. Hadid's misinterpretation of my remarks. I'm sorry, no official could ever be held personally responsible. If FGUA is a governmental authority, why are we taking a loan to pay them off? They're a private entity, and page 75 and 80, which we'll get to in attachment 3, clearly says that they can, we'll lose the Public Service Commission, which Jerry promised me we would have. Okay, but I would like to know how much we'll have left in attachment number 2 in Plantation Bay of the reserves. That's my only question on attachment 2. And by the way, adverse possession gets cleared up by the title company, and Jerry Cameron agreed with me that even mentioning the deed was ridiculous because the title company, through adverse possession, should be clearing that up, and it should not have even been on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
I think Mr. Brower can answer her question
All right.
about the reserves.
It's up to you.
Mr. Chair, John Brower, Financial Services. To kind of break it down in the simplest form in my head, it's FGUA has taken out an SRF loan to pay off all our loans. The only reserves that are going to be used are initially to pay off the USDA loan, like we mentioned earlier, so a check can be done and they can be paid on time. But that's going to be refilled with their loan on the closing day. So to the extent, I guess some reserves, we do have some reserves set aside for the certain debt that we have. Those will be gone, but the main reserves won't be.
When you say some reserves will be gone, but the reserve, Plantation Bay reserves or versus county reserves? Or-
There are small reserves, and they're called sinking funds in the 2 different utility funds that we have to hold because we have a debt that says we have to hold those reserves. Those will
Mr.
be-
Chairman, just for clarification, that lending organization requires it to be paid off with a check in advance of closing. So we've got a conundrum there where if it's not paid off, we can't close. And so FGUA, we've worked with them, they agree that, and they can't advance the money until it closes. They've agreed with us that if we advance the money for just a few days, that we will be reimbursed at closing.
Accurate. That's
That's it?
accurate. That's correct.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor. The motion, I'm going to try to read it again just so we're clear. The motion is budget resolutions and amendments and staff memorandum regarding amending the adopted fiscal year 2021 budget for well field generators, unanticipated revenue regarding Plantation Bay and Beverly Beach, and 2 budget transfers. That's the motions on the floor. We've had public comment. Bring it back to the board for any additional comment. If not, bring it back to the board for vote. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. We go on to item 3. I guess that's the draft property exchange resolution. Is that correct?
Well, actually, what we're going to do is we're going to address real estate issues in general.
Okay.
And that will be an item that will be reviewed and discussed with you. So for that purpose, I asked Tim Telford to present himself.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Tim Telfer, Flagler County Resiliency and Resource Stewardship Manager, and I'm looking over to IT to ask them to put up an exhibit. We've already heard about this dilemma. This was a temporary delay caused by a potential overlap on the parcels here. So what you're looking at right now, this is the Plantation Bay utility plant outlined in blue. You see Old Dixie Highway above. And the red line that runs north to south through there is a section line. The orange line, that box, is the potential overlap area. Now, we've talked, already given background on the cause of this issue. This was an older deed from 1984, recorded after the county took possession, that had a complex legal description on the back that dated back to the 1950s. Long story short, we researched both chain of title and legal description issues, looking for conflicts. The real clue to unraveling this mystery was provided by the Flagler County Property Appraiser's Office. Their staff was aware that the section lines in this area of Flagler County are actually not a full mile in length. They're actually shorter here. So when our surveyor and the title company's research people went and kind of sketched all this out, they saw the overlap. On Saturday, that surveyor's team went out in the field, located all the section corner pins, and confirmed that there's about a 350-degree error in where that section line is and where it should have been. So when you actually sketch that description out using the field information there, the end result is there is no survey overlap. Now, we've solved the problem. We're not quite done with it. We've still got to provide that surveyor's affidavit and a boundary survey to clear up this potential title cloud. That's required by the title commitment. But we do have a resolution on this issue, and unfortunately, it caused us a temporary delay. But we're finally at the finish line with it.
This is just on that one, this is the item just for the one where the orange box because of the lake there or where we.
Well, you're not voting on it. What he's doing is he's apprising you of a particular situation that was a dilemma.
Right, but it's that orange box is where the.
Yes, that
problem
was,
Okay.
that was the site of the dilemma.
Right.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, what we're trying to say is there is no issue. And Ms. Ude is correct that if there was an issue, it is the responsibility of the title company to resolve it. However, the problem for us was not the eventual outcome. I believe that there are several legal remedies, one of which Ms. Ude alluded to in the long run. But in the short run, if there's a cloud on the title and we can't get it off, we can't close. So that is the reason that Mr. Telfer has made such a prodigious effort to try to resolve this. And had he not exhausted all means, including going to property appraiser's office and looking at maps and so forth, and insisting that the surveyors go out and actually find the pins, we would be involved in litigation that may well run months as you try to track all of this
Okay, so
down.
you're just telling us that's been resolved.
Yeah, he did a fantastic job. And this just while I have the microphone, this has been an incredibly complex situation to try to divest ourselves of this asset. We have a couple of other issues to resolve, but there were pieces of property that couldn't be found. There were pieces of property that we didn't know why they were ever alluded to. We've got situations where we have lift stations that are located on someone else's property because they didn't locate them on our property next to it. All of those things have to be unwound, and the staff has made it a number one priority. Heidi has worked heavily with the county attorney's office and with Mr. Telfer, but we are indeed fortunate to have people of Tim Telfer's caliber on staff to resolve issues like this.
Okay. Any questions? Any questions?
Okay, with that, we'll move on to the second issue, and this is the exchange issue that's been alluded to. So for reference, if you look on the west or left side of your screen there, adjacent to the white lines, that's again the Plantation Bay utility plant. The road to the north is Old Dixie Highway. And the parcel outlined in white is owned by a company named WL Residential. The county piece is in blue below that. So the reason that we're here discussing a potential exchange today is in the purchase and sale agreement, there's a requirement that Flagler County provide FGUA 15 acres of upland to be used as an effluent disposal area. We do own that property to the south, however, as close to the plan as possible was preferable for FGUA. We did talk to WL Residential. They were open to an exchange. It made sense to the county. These parcels are essentially approximately of the same assessed value. When you consider the wetlands that are on each individual piece and the proximity or the road frontage that the WL Residential has, it seemed as an attractive option for the county to perform an exchange here to provide that 15 acres of uplands immediately adjacent to the plant there. And Jared, if you could move forward one more slide. Okay, so what Jared's bringing up right now is the proposed remedy. We've had conversations with WL Residential. They are comfortable with this exchange that's proposed here. I'm going to start from the north and work my way south. If you see that blue checkered box with 9.6 acres inside it, that's going to be the county's piece at the end of the exchange. That's road frontage on Old Dixie Highway, and that would be used as a public safety site in the future, basically a sheriff's station down on the south end of the county. That 39-acre piece in the middle is what's going to be transferred to FGUA, and it's 39 acres because of the wetlands that are on that property. Remember, we had to get 15 acres of uplands in this exchange for FGUA, or there were some potential other clauses that would be enacted that would compel the county to provide more land in the future. We feel confident with what we're showing you here on this 39.1 acres that we can safely resolve all those issues with FGUA. Now, as you move to the south, that 43.6 acre area outlined in the checkered white is what's going to be going to WL Residential if the board approves this exchange. There is one housekeeping matter on that property that we still have to address. It has an old DRI designation of a park parcel in it. We've talked this over internally. As staff, we feel that the proximity to Old Dixie Highway and the inaccessibility of this parcel render the park designation ultimately unusable. So we feel comfortable recommending to the board that we're going to recommend that we lift that park designation and the board proceed with the exchange. So with that, that's a light discussion of the proposed exchange. I'm available for any questions.
So, and WLR Residential, they're good for this.
They are, yes, they are.
Looks like they're
okay.
getting a better piece of land because of the wetlands issues, yeah.
Well, they lose the frontage.
Yeah, they lose frontage, and honestly,
Got the road.
when we talk about better, for the county and the ultimate plant manager, FGUA at the end, that 39.1 acre piece is a better effluent disposal area than anything else we could be providing.
Right. I agree.
And the bonus for it, while we insisted on reserving out 9.6 acres, is eventually the sheriff's department is going to need a substation on the southern end of the county. And due to the proximity to the Old Dixie and almost immediately to I-95, that's pretty much an ideal spot. That's probably 10 years down the road or more, but it's a good planning ahead effort. It was also, by doing this exchange, we cleaned up a number of different issues. As you can see in the upper left-hand corner of the green section, that our access road is actually partially on the piece of property that we will be receiving. And if you look down below that pond that shows up on the far left of that, there is an improved structure that is used for storage down there that we also pick up in this transaction.
I've always wondered about that building.
No questions?
Any questions from you? Okay.
So, members of the board, I want to just go ahead and supplement what Mr. Telfer said. in order to effectuate the transaction, we have to actually amend the DRI. So the DRI amendment and the exchange agreement, which also has to be advertised like a DRI amendment, were advertised for today. But because we're not taking action on it, we need a motion to continue it until we advertise the exchange of property and the DRI amendment again. The associated DRI amendment.
Does that DRI have to go up to the Northeast Florida group? I notice we get a lot of DRI amendments up there to approve.
I don't know if it's sub-threshold. That's a yes, it's sub-threshold, meaning it doesn't need to.
Okay. Yeah.
So we need a motion to continue the.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we continue consideration of the land exchange and the associated DRI amendment
Until advertised again.
until it's advertised again.
Second.
A motion and a second. Bring it back for public comment on this. Is this a motion? Yeah, it is a motion. It's a
Yeah.
motion, public comment.
Change until you, I'm really glad this is being deferred, but the company, in this here, you have 52 acres. I don't see anywhere where it says 43 acres or 39. ICI is, it's more Husseini, it's the same. They're getting a good deal here. The county took this 7 years ago. Anything that wasn't there, that is discovered 7 years later. Mr. Hadid, you really got us into a mess 7 years ago, didn't you? Thirdly, of all the audacity, the residents of Plantation Bay who live in the Flagler County section, including Westlake, and you keep on giving variances, we have no park whatsoever. How dare staff decide the level of services that we do not need a park? This is an outrage. I would continue this motion. I'm glad you are, because these partial exchanges to me are just absolutely beyond outrageous. But I do not want the motion to continue approved, which contains the arbitrary unilateral staff decision that we don't need a park. We need a park. The closest park to me in Plantation Bay is 3 miles away, or 2.5 miles a day, 2.5 miles away, and I have to pass a 350-foot cell tower, so I don't go there. So please do not accept the fact that we don't need a park.
Thank you. Bring it back.
Mr. Chairman?
Any additional comment?
Yes. In answer to that, I mean, I'm sure that they do need more amenities, but that does raise an issue that we would have to address, is that is private roads. It is a private gated community, not open to the public. And there's a Florida constitutional issue about expending public funds on private property. So we would have to come up with some sort of rational nexus for doing that. And secondly, another benefit that I had not talked about is that in the event that the golf course is unable to use the reuse water and we're unable to contain enough reuse water in our ponds, we need a spray field to have a DEP-approved acceptable method of disposing of that. And it is much better to move the spray field away from the intense residential area up to the front and near the frontage. So those are two considerations on that exchange.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I just have to say, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to do this, but the comments that are made by the speaker, it is quite clear from the record that I objected to this transaction, the manner it was handled. I had no say over what lands were transferred. I was not a part of that decision. Those recommendations that I did make with respect to that transaction were rejected. Thank you.
So we have, Yes, of course.
Mr. Cameron, you know, the mention of a park and stuff, I just want to bring up and bring to everybody's mind. I get a lot of phone calls about the homeless in the parks, the uncontrollable things that we're able to handle, and that's awful close to Volusia, who's seems to be pushing and migrating up this way. So I would be very cautious before we open up a can of worms like that. And I'd like to also say this, regardless of one unhinged individual saying anything, I think y'all have done a wonderful job.
Please,
I think
you're not
y'all,
allowed to speak at this point.
I think y'all have done a wonderful job handling this water situation since I have come into office. And what we've been able to achieve and what we've been able to make happen has been phenomenal. Al, or Mr. Hadid, especially you, navigating all this legal stuff that we've had to do. And I know a lot of the citizens down there are very happy and very content. So thank you for what y'all have done.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor continue the property exchange resolution until resolved. Is that basically what the?
Until it can be re-advertised.
And we have a second, until it's re-advertised,
And the DRI amendment.
and a DRI amendment. That motion is on the floor. We have a second. We've had public comment. Bring it back to the board for vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. We're on to the next item, and I'll let, I guess, Mr. Hadid describe
Yes.
that one.
Okay, we're addressing now the utility regulatory ordinance. We're not asking you to adopt it today. It is advertised for consideration so that people can make their comments. Essentially, well, first off, because the county did divest itself of PSC jurisdiction, the county enacted a utility regulatory authority ordinance. And so we have jurisdiction over privately owned utilities. By the way, governmental entities who operate utilities are not subject to PSC jurisdiction, which is why the Florida Governmental Utility Authority is not subject to the Public Service Commission because it is not a private entity. It is a public entity authorized by statute, state statute. So what we've done here in this, we've done two things in this ordinance I mentioned to you in the opening. One was we recognized FGUA. I think it probably existed at the time we did our regulatory ordinance, but we didn't know that we would be doing anything with FGUA. So this makes sure that FGUA's status is recognized and that they're not subject to our utility regulatory ordinance, okay? The second thing it does, since we're going to go ahead and amend it for this, we added in that under special circumstances approved by the board, a centralized wastewater system can be extended into an area where there are septic tanks in the coastal area in order to minimize pollution of surface waters and of groundwater. So it would have to be on a petition-by-petition basis. This would be an HOA, Community Development District, some sort of association that operated a more centralized operation to be able to extend centralized service in order to either take property off of on-site septic or to have development that didn't need to use on-site septic. And so though that is consistent with our comp plan, we've talked about this a number of times in any number of developments. I don't think I need to belabor it, but it is laid out, the whereas is in there. Again, you're not having to make a decision today, but I wanted to alert you through this special meeting that this is a feature of this change in the ordinance that is not related to FGUA, so that you have time to think about it or ask any questions of us concerning that subject. Okay? So that's all I have on that, and the action I ask for is that you continue it until it's advertised again. If you have any comments to make, certainly make them now, or you can make them, after the meeting as you digest that information.
Okay, so back to the board for possible
Mr. Chairman, I move that we extend the time limit on the rewrite of the Utility Regulatory Authority Ordinance until such time as it can be re-advertised and brought back before us.
Second.
We have a motion and a second concerning attachment 4, which is as described. Any additional public comment? Seeing none, we'll go on. Any additional comment from the board? If not, bring it back to the board to continue the draft utility ordinance amendment and until advertised. Is that basically it? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. I believe, back to our county administrator, those are the items we were to discuss at this special meeting, unless there's something else to bring up at this point.
Yes, there are. The
Okay.
last category is nothing you have to vote on. It's just a preview of what remains, other than what you've already heard. So there are a number of other contractual instruments that are part of this transaction. I want to just give you a broad sweep so you know what's coming. We'll be scheduling another meeting when we're ready. So those items will be on it, the ones I'm now going to describe, plus the ones you've just continued until they're advertised again. Okay? So these are the additional items. You haven't seen them. I'm just letting you know that they're in the pipeline. We're going to have to amend our purchase and sale agreement because as we've gone through the process, we've learned we've got different properties, we've got developer agreements that have got to be assigned to FGUA. So all of that additional detail will make its way into the purchase and sale agreement. That will come to you as an amendment, and you'll be able to see each of the things that are being changed. So that's one. We're going to need to have an assignment, an assumption of the developer agreements, the contracts, and the leases that we now have in operating our utility. We're going to need to assign those and have those assumed by FGUA. We have a number of outstanding assignments with local governments that have entered into interlocal agreements with us concerning the utility. Volusia County, we have an emergency water connection. City of Flagler Beach, emergency water connection. We have an agreement with the City of Palm Coast for the potable water that goes to the Beverly Beach utility system. So we'll need that approved. So those are outstanding. We have an assignment from the Plantation Bay Country Club that is due in order for us to assign the rights on the reuse water. Assign them, that is, to FGUA. This is part of our divesting of our utility operations. We're gonna need to authorize title transfers to vehicles and other rolling stock. There'll be a bill of sale. There may be title instruments that you'll have to execute, that we'll have to approve for execution. Maybe it's an easement, maybe it's an assignment. And there could be other things that I'm overlooking, but that is a kind of a menu of what you'll be looking at the next time we get together.
Fair enough.
That's it. Unless you have any questions.
Mr. Cameron, I just want to give you a chance if there was anything you wanted to add at this point. I'm going to bring it back to the board for comment also.
No, other than the fact, it's just a terribly complex transaction. And we're cleaning up a lot of things that have been hanging out there for years. Staff has done a fantastic job with doing that.
Yeah, I just might add that this is a great move forward for the Plantation Bay water system with FGUA, but I also understand it's pretty complicated. So if any of the other board members have anything to add?
I'll add, I had to look up defeasance in the dictionary. Thank you, Al.
You were not the only one that asked me that question.
Any other comments from the members? Seeing none, as far as I'm concerned, there's no further.
No, one thing.
Okay.
I'm sorry. The last
Don't
act,
say-
the last act,
The
I'm
real
sorry.
last one.
I'm
What's the
sorry.
real last one, Al?
Okay. I meant, real last act, which is identified there, is to continue the authorization you've given the county administrator and myself to take all the actions necessary to close the transfer of our utility assets to the FGUA.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we continue to authorize Mr. Adid and Mr. Cameron to take actions as needed to complete this exercise.
Second? Second by Mr. Erickson. Public comment?
I really don't think that it would be, no one has mentioned that this is an enterprise fund. It's not taxpayers' money. It's my money. It's my money. It's not your money. It's my money. And to authorize the county attorney, who has had 7 years to go through any kind of a mess, to take unilateral action without coming before our elected officials, to me is a disservice to every resident of any of the districts. Also, page 75, which says that it will be a staff member who will be a board member of FGUA instead of an elected official, because that elected officials can come and go. The elected officials hire the county attorney and county administrator. When you get elected, you're guaranteed 4 years. You can hire an attorney and fire his rear end 2 weeks later. So if someone is going to sit on FGUA board, if it's mandatory, and I don't believe that this FGUA is totally governmental, I'm going to research that. If anyone should sit on the board, it has to be someone who's chosen by the citizens, especially since it's not even your money. It's our money, and you are shutting off my income and everyone else's to the whims of 2 or 3 hired employees. That is outrageous. It should be an elected official if someone has to sit on that board, not a hired staff member. We elected you. We did not elect staff. You hire and fire staff. Please, if nothing else, you've agreed with me today. Please understand, I do my homework. I'm coming from the heart. Think about it ask for all these little things and glitches that have to be cleared up. The mess was made by the same person who created them 7 years ago. And as far as attacking anybody for using their First Amendment rights, it is the most despicable act that Mr. Mullins could do to any human being. I am far from unhinged. I am I do my homework, and I read all 81 pages. I don't believe anybody else in this room did. Mr. Hadid can't even recall things he did 7 years ago, including flip-flop some of the property I was told by Dennis McDonald on the original purchase, giving Maury Husseini, we need a park in Plantation Bay. You keep approving Maury Husseini houses and houses. Yes, it's a park. Make Husseini give a park the next time you give him permission to build another 100 houses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I initially had the same view that Ms. Yu did, but it is not our decision. FGUA determines the makeup of their board, and they said that they wanted staff member and not elected officials on the board.
All right, thank you. We have a motion on the floor I want to make sure I had the right words on it.
To extend the authority to Mr. Hadid and Mr. Cameron to continue to execute this program.
That's the motion, and it's been seconded. We've had public comment, so all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. That passes unanimously. Thank you all.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
I better check with Mr. Adib one last time, just in case. All right, motion is accepted, we're adjourned.